Goblincore. It's an aesthetic similarly related to cottagecore, but instead of pink flowy skirts and baking, it surrounds frogs, dirt, and dark sweaters. After all the cottagecore videos I did, you guys wanted to see some goblin content, so here it is. To make plant pigmented watercolor, as well as how to paint with it, I'm first heading outside to find any kind of plant that I think will give me some kind of colored pigment after being steeped in water. So I'm first heading to a part in the backyard where there are many yellowed leaves, and I went with these instead of the brown ones because they still had some moisture in them, which I thought would do better in giving me color than the crispy dry ones. After that, I went to some bushes where I have some wandering Jew, also known as purple heart, and began picking the leaves off of the stem. Once I had gathered enough of those and put them with my leaves, I just grabbed a handful of dirt and added that to the others. Once I had those all together, I headed inside and grabbed a cutting board as well as 3 little glass dishes. With a knife, I'm taking my yellow leaves and just kind of scrunching them up and then chopping them into really fine bits. You're going to want to cut these up pretty small, as they give off more color if they are in smaller chunks rather than larger ones. And once that's chopped up, I'm measuring out a tablespoon for that. I'm going to do the same thing for my purple heart, except kind of slicing it and then dicing it, if you will. And an interesting thing I just wanted to mention about these really quick is that the first 2 times I made paint out of these purple heart plants, it turned out this really lovely purple color. And the time that I made it here, it actually turned out a green. So I'm not sure if that's because of the time I picked the plant or maybe the period that they were sitting out on my desk before I actually cut them up and put the water in. So just keep that in mind that different plants may come out as different colors at different times. Once again, just measuring out the tablespoon, and then up last, I am grabbing my dirt, again in a tablespoon, and adding that to the last dish. Next, I'm grabbing some boiling water, and in this clip, I'm only adding a teaspoon, but that was not enough whatsoever. So to your tablespoon of diced plants or dirt, you're going to want to add a tablespoon of boiling water. A teaspoon was not nearly enough. And to get paint out of these, the mud can be strained immediately. It doesn't need to really steep or anything. But for the purple heart and the leaves, you're going to want to leave those for at least 24 hours to soak in the water, if not 48, and then you can strain them. So gathering my plants as well as a bit of tapioca with water to create some white, I'm just going to add them into these smaller tins, so transporting the tapioca and water and then straining all the other 3. Now for the painting part, I'm grabbing some watercolor paper, my colors, some water, some tissue, and my paintbrushes. I'm beginning by sketching out the general stem shape and erasing as much as possible because you won't be able to erase them afterwards, then kind of doing an oval at the top and then a dome over that oval. Keep in mind that mushrooms come in all crazy shapes and sizes as well as colors. Just have fun with it. Don't worry about it being too perfect. I'm kind of using mainly the leaf here and then darkening it up at the bottom and the top of the stem with the mud, and then making kind of like a gray for underneath, adding some of the green to have some spots at the top as well as to splatter some over it just to give it a little bit more color. And yeah, those are the watercolors and the mushroom I painted. Since we just made some paint as well as painted a picture, whatever you chose to paint, I figured I would make a frame. And what better way to make a frame than with something out of the woods? So I headed into my backyard and I just began looking for sticks I thought would be a good size to frame my art. So I looked for about 1/2 inch to 1 inch thick sticks / thick vines. I also looked for some thin flexible vine to tie the pieces together. Now that I had all of my pieces, I headed inside and set everything on my desk. To size the sticks properly, I'm taking my watercolor paper book and kind of placing them around there because that's the size of my picture, so I want it to fit around that piece of paper. I broke them accordingly and then kind of worked on which would be the top, the bottom, and the sides. For the vine, I just kind of pushed all the leaves off and then worked on tying the bottom of the frame together. If you don't have really amazing flexible vine like I'm lucky to have in my backyard, you could totally use twine for this, string, yarn, use whatever you'd like, whatever you have. Once all of my sides were secured together, I grabbed my last piece of vine, evened up the bottoms a little bit, and then stuck them into the tying that I created at the top to make a handle where I could hang it on the wall. To put the picture in though, since there's no kind of glass that I can put between a backing, I am taking some paper clips as well as hot glue and sticking those to the sticks on the back for either side, and then you can just slide in your piece of paper, whatever you want to frame, into it, swap it out whenever you'd like, and yeah, that is the completed frame. Now, whenever I looked up GOBLINCORE on Pinterest, I often saw buttons and different collages and little groups of trinkets that people had collected. And I personally am a button hoarder. I just like to have them on hand, and I love cool antique ones. So when I saw that buttons were a reoccurring thing in GOBLINCORE, I thought it would be pretty cool to incorporate them into some kind of accessory. So to make some button rings, you're going to need a button of any kind, as well as some wire. I'm just putting it through the first hole, going back down the second one, and then kind of sizing it to my finger before I continually just push it through and wrapping it around and around and around. I'm not trying to be too precise about this. I want it to look like the wire is being wrapped around the initial circle, but you can do it super tight. Just twist it however you'd like. The second version I made was a little bit more clean, so I'm taking my wire strand, folding it in half, and then folding it in half again so that I have 4 strands, and then sticking all 4 of those strands in the right hole and then coming down in the left, and then just twisting it a bit at the bottom so there's more straight strands instead of them twisted. Next, for button earrings, I'm taking 2 of these same green ones. Again, grabbing wire. You could also use bronze or gold colored wire. I just already had silver, so I figured I'd use them. But again, going through the holes, twisting it at the back really close to the base of the button, and then kind of pressing it forward and making this arch shape at the top, then dipping down a little bit, and then cutting off the excess so you have this long hoop that can go through your ear hole. Doing the same thing to the other one, twisting it at the base, kind of folding it up and making that arch at the top that dips down for the earring, and you're done. To make this treasure or trinket trunk, you're going to need some kind of box. You can literally choose any size and you'll just have to form the lid according to that. And the first thing I'm doing is cutting off all the flaps, as well as just ripping off some of the tape from the sides. Then I'm going to take a huge piece of cardboard, cut off from another box, and even up the edges. Now you're going to want to cut this so that the corrugated lines are going horizontal, and you're going to want to cut it to the width of the top of your box. Once that was the proper size, I'm going to bend each and every line of that corrugation on the cardboard so that I can mold it into a dome shape. So I'm just going every single line and bending that up. Then I'm grabbing my box and kind of forming it to how I want it to sit on top, and then bringing it over in that shape to some cardboard and tracing out what will be the cap for the edge of the lid. Now, with those 2 pieces that I cut out identically and some hot glue, I'm going to put a strip of glue all the way around and bend the cardboard lid according to that. And then I just did the same exact thing for the other side. Now I'm going to do the first coat of paint with white, just so I have a base layer that I can put my actual color over top really smoothly. So I'm just squeezing out a bunch and covering it completely in just some really cheap white acrylic paint. Once both of those pieces are colored, I kind of made a little makeshift paint palette out of some cardboard, and I tried to mix up a brown color. Unfortunately, I had some really random acrylic paints and was not able to go out into the store, and I ended up having to transfer it on a bigger piece of cardboard, and it just was not turning out into the color I wanted. And I actually end up changing this base color 2 more times, I believe, just because I did not like it and didn't want to show you guys something that I wasn't completely satisfied with. But once those pieces were painted, I wanted to finish the edges, and since on the lid especially you can tell that it's cardboard because of the corrugation around the edges, I'm folding up some ribbon at the edge and just gluing it along that seam. It kind of makes it look more like a trunk or a chest too as well. And don't worry about the crazy color, we're also going to be painting this. So grab any ribbon that you have, any thickness or color, depending on what you want it to look like, fold in the ends so that it looks neat, and just glue it along all the edges that you want to be kind of covered or look a little bit more finished. I did this to both the sides for the lid and then also the top and bottom all the way around on the actual trunk. To attach the lid though, I'm taping the front so that it is perfectly aligned and then grabbing some thicker 1.5 or 1 inch ribbon to glue on half of the lid and the other half on the bottom so that it will open up like a hinge. Removing the tape, you can see how it opens well and the front aligns properly. I did cover that inner seam where the hinge was with some material after this, and now I'm just mixing up the color for the ribbon. I was going to do kind of a green and it turned out a lot more teal than I liked, so I also changed this. I did brown and then teal and then darkened the teal up a little bit and then repainted the base as well. So yeah, I had quite a lot of color changes, but I eventually made it to something that I liked. Once I finally got my color combination down and I put a piece of material on the inside, it was complete.